Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar, which is the first in our new sustainability series, conceptualized in collaboration with Chamber member, the Singapore American School, or SAS, and which is also our exclusive series sponsor. I want to thank SAS for its long-term encouragement and support of its chamber. It is such a pleasure for me and my team to continue our collaborative partnership with you. This series will focus on the two key pillars of sustainability: us, people, and our planet, our interdependence, and our responsibility to protect our quality of life and our planet for future generations. We start the series today with this event on green buildings, using SAS's own development as a case study. It is one of the first buildings in Singapore to adopt the BCA Green Mark 2021, which is part of the Singapore Green Building Master Plan. This aims to promote a healthier quality of life for us, our physical and mental well-being, and for our environment and our planet. SAS is to be congratulated on its intention and execution. We all know about sick building syndrome, and many of us still live and work in them. That is why this chamber is a proud advocate for the Integrated Design Process, or IDP. This is a method for realizing high-performance buildings that contribute to sustainable communities and a better quality of life. It's a collaborative process that focuses on every discipline involved in design, construction, operation, and occupancy of a building over its life cycle. Used properly, IDP saves developers millions of dollars in capital expenditure when designing and constructing a building, and in operating expenditure when the building is completed and operating begins. I, for one, am at a loss as to why so few developers use IDP when the commercial and environmental benefits are so very clear. Today, we are honored to have two guest speakers. Mr. Tan Kok Tai is a distinguished and respected architect and president of the Singapore Green Building Council. Kok Tai will deliver a keynote address. He will be followed by Mr. Simon Thomas, Director of Facilities and Services for the Singapore American School, and Simon will talk about what's next for their high-performing buildings. After Simon's address, I will return to moderate the dialogue with you. Please play your part in the dialogue by typing your questions into the Q&A box, which you'll find in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can vote for those questions which appeal most to you, and since this is the season of goodwill to all people, you'll be doing me a favor as your moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. Tan Kok Tai to address us. Kok Tai, over to you.
Thank you, Victor, and good morning, everyone. My name is Kok Tai, and I'm the president of Singapore Green Building Council. Let me start my share screen. Okay. So good morning, everyone. We all know the importance of climate challenge and climate change. COP26, which held recently, where all the leaders from the world gathered to address climate change and to keep our temperature to be 1.5 degrees by 2030 is already a challenge. So in Singapore context, we have our own Singapore Green Building Master Plan. Now, our green journey doesn't start just recently. It started in 2005 with several iterations of Green Building Master Plan to bring us to where we are today. So from 2005, where we start our Green Mark building, and our Green Mark assessment from Gold Plus to Platinum until today, where we launched in 2021 the Singapore Green Building Master Plan 2021, where we are pushing for more super low energy building in Singapore context. And in a broad outcome for 2030, 80% of our GFA will be achieving a Green Mark for the next step, and the next step will be the mainstreaming of super low energy building. In short, SGBMP will play an important role in helping to meet Singapore's sustainability ambitions and international commitment. Basically, it falls under the big umbrella of the Singapore Green Plan. And within it, there is a Singapore Enhanced 2030 Nationality Determined Contributions, and also the long-term low emissions development strategy. All these fall into the Singapore Green Plan 2030. And you know that in Singapore, or even in Singapore, 20% the building contribute about 20% of our Singapore carbon emissions. And green building can contribute a big part in our transition to a low carbon and climate resilient future. So within the Singapore Green Plan, there are several core. There's a city in nature, there's a sustainability living, energy reset, green economy, and resilient future. So under energy reset is where the Singapore Green Master Plan play an important role in reducing the energy consumption in buildings, from construction to operations and also to maintenance. The Singapore Green Building Master Plan 2021 actually engaged a lot of stakeholders. It's a co-created with the industry, in the built environment industry. We spent almost 2 years engaging various stakeholders in the built environment to come up with this, the Singapore Green Building Master Plan 2021. So more than 80 BE stakeholders was involved in various working committees to formulate and refine the master plan details. And we also engaged more than 5,000 stakeholders across the various initiatives, from the developers to the contractors to the subcontractors, all the way to people who maintain the buildings, and also to manage the building as well. And almost 92%, in fact, more than 92% agreed that we need to do more for our green our buildings to tackle the impact of climate change. I think everyone in the industry understands the importance of climate change and the challenge that we have. And there are various concerns that how we are supposed to do to reach this goal, right? And 94% of them view that more urgent measures should be put in place in the next 5 to 10 years for all new buildings to be super low energy buildings. And 66% agreed that individual action, such as making choices to live, work in green building, and advancing the benefits of green building, are ways to tackle climate change. So BCA and SGBC will continue to engage stakeholders to raise awareness and aspiration for the next leg, and work with wider industry to deliver the key outcome and initiative for Singapore Green Building Master Plan. For instance, now in SGBC, we are also engaging with the people who are in finance, who are very keen to do green bond and green financing for developers as well as construction. We also initiated with banks for green renovation loan to allow for homeowner to have better rates for them to renovate their building using, renovate their homes using green building materials. So what is this Singapore Green Building Master Plan key component? So we talk about 80-80-80 in 2030. Basically, 80% of our building to be green by 2030. The Green Plan will step up the pace for greening all our buildings and raise the sustainability standard for all our buildings from 2005 and all the way until now. 80% of our new development will be super low energy by 2030. So the mainstream of SLE performance for new building in 2030, large majority of new development will achieve this, especially now with all the government building is pushing towards a super low energy, and also in the some of the government land sales is governments encouraging them to go for super low energy. And recently, just 1 month ago, the MND have announced initiative, GFA initiative for building to go for super low energy. So these are all the incentives that is put in to push the market to go for more super low energy, right? 80% of the energy improvement from 2005 levels onwards by 2030. So this will push boundary in energy efficiency for best-in-class green buildings through research, innovations, and implementation. And all these three will come back to the key vision, which is a leading green built environment, mitigating climate change and providing a healthy, livable, and sustainable built environment for all. And in this case, during this COVID-19, we also know that how important living in a healthy and livable, sustainable environment for all of us, because every one of us is, work from home. We cannot go out with all the lockdown at a certain point. So the home environment or even some of the office environment become key components in driving this. So measures to achieve these three key outcomes for the SGBMP. Of course, the first one in Singapore context regulations will be raising, this year will be raising the minimum energy efficiency requirement for buildings in 2021. Green Mark is actually an important core in driving sustainability and green building in Singapore. So the Green Mark will be raised, the standard will be raised, and new Green Mark super low energy standard for residential building will be introduced as well. Now, for green building, most of the time our experience is that we don't have problem convincing building owners or building users or to go for a green building because they see the benefits of cost saving and also benefits to their users. The challenge, one of the biggest challenge really is for residential building because there is no ownership from the developer to the house owner. So normally developer will buy a land, develop the residential, and then sell the unit, and then the whole building will be managed by the residential MCST. So there's always a challenge to encourage developer who are developing residential unit to go for green building, right? The third will be the greengovernment.sg, where public sector leads to mainstream super low energy performance of building. Data transparency is important. BCA is collecting all the data and publish building energy performance data, starting with commercial building in the second half of 2021. Of course, there will be support measure, explore measure to encourage super low energy adoption in the private sector, because the private sector will still perceive that, not perceive, in fact it's true that green building will still cost money to them. So in today's context where most business is facing challenges because of the lockdown, asking them to go for green building will need to have more push and encouragement for them to do so. Explore enhancing funding support for GBIC program and enhance green financing and develop capabilities for building environment sector. Of course, because the super low energy have another criteria, so we need to build capabilities for the consultants as well as the contractors and also developers to have the capability to do super low energy building, right? So all these come back to the three core of 80-80-80-30. So the first one will be 80% building by GFA to be green. So in Singapore context, BCA will step up the pace of greening building and will publish building energy performance data starting with commercial in second half of 2021, as I mentioned earlier on. So by this is the roadmap. In 2013, all building owners are required to submit their building performance data. By 2017, building owners can opt voluntarily to have their building energy data disclosed to the public. And by 2020, circular to give notice, the data submitted by 2020 onward will be published. So in 2021, it will all be in published data now, right? So commercial building obviously includes office, hotel, retail, and mixed development. Don't think we can do it for the residential because it's very difficult to get data from each individual owners. So in today's context, Greenmark building are aiming for and achieving higher energy efficiency standard. There's always a strong business case for building to strive for higher energy building performance. And industry is targeting to achieve higher energy efficiency standard across various building typology over the last 5 years. So you look at the payback on the left in blue will be the non-residential building. The payback period for platinum will be around 2.3 to 5.8 years. And the NPV saving per GFA will be about 225. And on the residential building side, on the platinum side, it will be about 0.79% to 4.5% of the green cost premium. Obviously, just I mentioned that we couldn't get the payback yet because of the residential project is enjoyed by the household, but the NPV saving is about 140 per GFA. So if you look at the chart, basically there's a strong business case for developers to strive for higher standard in their buildings, right? Yeah, especially like I said, for commercial buildings. Yeah. So this is also to show that higher minimum energy efficiency requirements for new and existing building. Existing building means those are undergoing major retrofit. So from 30%, we are going to raise it to minimum 50%. So in a nutshell, if you talk about a platinum building, maybe about 5 or 10 years ago, sorry, a gold plus building that's 5 or 10 years ago, today actually is a platinum. A platinum building 5 to 10 years ago, today actually is a gold plus standard. So basically, BCA under the Green Master Plan is raising the standard for the EE for all the buildings. Yeah. So to achieve our target by 2030. So this one is on the Greenmark 2021. So it's a key lever facilitate high performance and climate action in building. So in this case, Greenmark 2021 will be the call for all the developers to use as a benchmark. As you know, they have different benchmark in this region or in the worldwide in the sense. You got LEED, you got 5-star, you got Cabri. But in Singapore, we always use Greenmark because Greenmark is more catered for our Singapore context as well as our tropical weather and the challenges that we have, which one of the criteria will be the energy efficiency, right? Because in Singapore, we are talking about 3 resilience. First is water, second is food, third is energy. So this form important call to achieve the energy efficiency for the whole Singapore. Right. So the one of the challenge in pushing or encouraging people to go for super low energy is obviously dollar and cents. That's number one. Number two, of course, is the knowledge base, right? But really, at the end of the day, if the key stakeholders believe in challenge of climate change, automatically they will do it, and they'll find consultants and they'll find means to achieve those targets. And we have seen it in the market. There are a couple of there are few well-known developer who will push for this green building regardless of cost and regardless of the consultant. They'll find ways to achieve it, right? So in this case, as per today, we have 14 super low energy, we have 14 super low energy building in 2018. But in today's context, we have 43 projects in 2020 involving 82 industry stakeholders. As I mentioned earlier on, if you look at the project, most of them are really office commercial building. So recently, if you read in the newspaper, there are 2 projects in residential that achieved the super low energy building. One is a Gold Plus super low energy, and one is a Platinum super low energy. And the Platinum super low energy is actually driven by city development in their 80 Anson Road development, which is a 4-in-1 development, residential, a service apartment, and office, and retail within the same building. So for the business case for SLE with net positive saving over the life cycle, widespread adoption of super low energy in Singapore will help reduce energy use and carbon emissions in built environment sector. So if you look at the super low energy, there's a green premium cost. This is always a challenge at the green cost premium. Range from 1% to 4.6%. Simple payback is about 2.11 to 5.77 years. As I mentioned earlier, the NPV saving per GFA is about 250. So why there's such a big range in the green cost building? Obviously, it depends on the type of development, depends on the site context, depends on the surrounding. So there are a lot of variables when we design the green buildings. Obviously, the one that don't cost you an arm or a leg is that you approach it from a passive architecture point of view. And after that, if you still need to enhance the building further, then we go for the active architecture implementation. So fundamentally, we will design the building to achieve for passive architecture, avoid the Western sun, capitalize on the ventilation, make sure buildings are well ventilated. So these are some of the basic elements that really it should have in a good building design. Yeah. So for the 80% of new development to be super low energy, obviously government take the lead to bring super low energy building into the mainstream. So as I explained earlier, there's a greengovernment.sg for the public sector will take the lead on SLE adoption and to bring them to the mainstream, and driving SLE in the private sector will be measured to encourage SLE adoption, which I explained earlier about the new GFA incentive announced by the MND, by the minister last month, where they give 2% GFA incentive for adoption of super low energy and 3% for non-government building. Of course, it's all in one basket together with IDD and also together with DFMA. So it's a 3-in-1 basket that you need to achieve in order to enjoy the 2 or 3% of the GFA enhancement. Yeah. And this one has been long in the making, because this has been discussed for many years for the government to put in a GFA incentive to push for super low energy buildings. Yeah. So on the energy side, we'll be ramping up research and innovation to push the boundary in EE for best-in-class green building and pave the way for low carbon built environment. So in this case, you look at the number of years in 2030 is where we achieve 80% of the energy saving improvement target over 2005 base. So some of the developed technology solution to R&I is a green building innovative cluster. So currently, best-in-class building are able to achieve EE of more than 65% better than 2005 level, right? So also they are looking into the enhancing funding support for the GPIC program, yeah, which is important into their context. Yeah. So the GPIC program, it will develop innovative and cost-effective technology solution for super low energy, and this all tie into the end-to-end ecosystem from development to adoption of technological solutions. Okay, this one will be more on GPIC program as well, how they tie back to the Green Tech Directory, where information is shared in an online library, right? And on the right-hand side is to benchmark your building against similar buildings. So again, these are all these are all public information that you can get. And this will bring back into the central where you have ideas and costs, so that you know that at the end of the day, when you design or develop a building, you have the best in class to put in your building. So to recap on the Singapore Green Building Master Plan, this is the 80-80-80 in 2030, and we are actually on the way to achieve this. A lot of challenges along the way. Is not as simple as I mentioned in this 10 or 15 minutes presentation. There's a lot of people, a lot of time spent in creating this, and also a lot of effort to push for each and individual of them to achieve all the objectives by 2030. Yeah. Because I know, because I have been working on the ground with some of the developers, and it's not easy in today's context to convince developer, even with the GFA incentive pushed out by the government, to ask them to go for SLE building, because in today's context, they are already facing business challenges because of the COVID-19. Running costs is going up, construction costs is going up. So in today's context, basically, is very challenging. But having said that, climate change is a global challenge, and it's not only for our generation, but more importantly, actually, it's for our next generation. So what we are doing is actually for our next generation. So it will be very short-sighted if you look at the building context and contribute within the next couple of years, where this challenge really is another decades down the road. Yeah. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I will pass to the presentation to Simon. Simon is actually waiting. Yeah. So if you have any question, I can answer later. Yeah. Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tang. Yeah, and hello everyone. Here, greetings from Woodlands up here. I'll just share my screen and we'll get this going. So good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Today I've got quite a lot of things to share with you over the next 20 minutes. I'm going to stay quite high level here, but hopefully with the Q&A you'll have a chance to delve into any questions that you have here. A quick word about Singapore American School. I suppose many of you on the call will know us over here. We have been established for over 50 years. We have over 4,000 students supported by 1,000 staff. We have quite a lot of real estate up here, and so green building is really, really important to us, not just as it's the right thing to do, but also to control our operating costs. We have almost 1.3 million square feet of real estate. We've just started the first phase of a 5-year, $350 million master plan to upgrade our current campus here, which gives us a significant opportunity to move forward with all of the things that Professor Tang highlighted in his talk. I feel grateful working for an organization and having worked for an organization for quite some time that actually doesn't need to see those NPV calculations or the beneficial GFA that you get by adopting green. In a non-for-profit educational institution such as Singapore American School, we tend to go after these things just because we think it's the right thing to do and we think it's the right thing for the future. So whenever we go after our building projects, this idea of high performance building, green building, whatever you would like to refer it to, is top of the list, not just for acting as a leader in the environmental stage of the building environment, but most importantly, to provide a role model and a place of learning for the students that we're educating from 4 years old all the way up to 18. So before we start, I just wanted to show a quick video of the first phase of our project so you can get a sense of the scale and some of the buildings that we have here. And I'll just make sure that you can see this and hear it. So hopefully that will give you some sort of idea of the types of buildings that we're developing as part of this campus upgrade plan. So when the first opportunity came to really reimagine what we were doing here, sustainability was really one of the key drivers for this. You can see here the 6 themes for the future of the campus here. And a lot of them mirror what you're seeing in your adult spaces, the new types of offices that you're working in, the new types of work that you're doing, the collaboration that you're seeing throughout the professional environment. Those type of environments are actually what we are trying to create inside our schools. We actually call them learning neighborhoods, highly modular functional spaces within the school with a clear understanding on sustainability. So I've been involved in green building in Singapore since 2008. And when a new project comes up, you always try not to just recreate the old playbook here. You're always looking for something new. So when we brought this to the table, I started to think, right, what can we do differently? How can we push the envelope for high performance buildings here? I think the why is compelling. Professor Tang gave us some of the economic drivers for adopting a sustainability focus in buildings, but for us, it's a little bit different. And these aren't in any particular order, but I think they become pretty obvious when you look at it through the lens of a not-for-profit organization that is completely focused on education of children. So we want to spend less money in our OPEX. Most buildings suffer from this idea that the person that builds them doesn't operate them. And when that happens in most developers, they're not really that engaged with trying to save the operating cost of the building. They're very much about the CapEx, what does the building look like, how can I sell it? And then when it comes to decisions that might reduce the overall operating costs and carbon footprint of the building, they're not so relevant in the discussion at those sort of management tables. So for us, we are all about the life cycle of the building. Our only income is really from the school fees of the students, and every dollar spent on the building, whether it be on electricity, maintenance, or water, is a dollar less spent on education. And then I think it's very, very important to keep in mind that, you know, we are custodians of this generation and we will be handing it to the next generation and giving them an opportunity to work in an urban setting where they can see that you can actually make a difference. Most children that are graduating from Singapore American School and many of the schools in Singapore will be spending their entire life in a dense urban environment. And they need to understand what sort of technologies and approaches you can use to reduce the impact there. And then I think most importantly, and actually COVID has brought this to the fore, but it really wasn't about COVID when we started this, was about healthy learning environment. This focus on wellness in the space must be at the fore. You know, there's a huge amount of empirical evidence for the performance of people, whether in an office or a school, if they feel well and engaged and at home in the building. So I'm not going to go through this because it's not really a pitch on how great our building is, but there's a number of things in here that I think would be attractive to people if you want to engage with me and understand the details behind this. We are going through a number of certification schemes that will endorse this design approach, but you can see some of the highlights from that just in the elementary school alone. There's a huge amount that's actually important to us when you look at a high performance building. And I think these things often get lost or there's a conflict. So this is as clear as we could make it on what is actually important to us. And then how are we going to respond to these things here? So you'll see the usual ones, energy, water, they're very common to people that have been engaged in Green Mark and things like that. What you'll also see towards the other end is mind and movement, education and operations here. So we're really trying to incorporate a much more holistic view of the whole building and be very, very intentional about that in design by trying to come up with a response to each one of these factors inside our high performance building here. We also looked at it from different angles here. So basically, when you start to break up the building like this, it helps you understand where the money's going, and people talk about green building premiums. I actually personally don't subscribe to that. I think if you are intentional in your design, you pretty much spend the same amount of money that you were going to spend originally, because green building is about building less, not building more, and more challenge to the the professionals working with you allow them to scale down their equipment, saving you money. So this is quite easy. This little chart tells us, right, I'm going to spend extra money on indoor comfort here. Other things really are either about compliance or, you know, have an impact on the community or as part of student learning. But really, when I look at the whole building, on the whole of it, actually cost implications for us were only really on indoor comfort. So how do we get this more holistic view of high performance building? And really we must give a nod to Greenmark 2021. It really has changed a lot. When I did the first Greenmark course in 2008 here, it was really very much about energy, chiller plants here, very little about the holistic view of the building. And now with new international standards coming in, we've got this WELL certification from America that is being used extensively. And the new Greenmark 2021, you start to see the building environment much more holistically here. And so we've adopted these two accreditations to really validate our design, help us measure it, and also help us provide a framework for our consultant team to work through here. I want to just thank our partners. We've got two partners that we work with closely, IEN Consultants, a Malaysian sustainability firm that do a great job for us, and Atelier 10, who we also work with on the WELL side of things. So can't do it without them. Now, interestingly, these two standards, when you match them together, have a huge amount of overlap. So it's not as if you are spending the money twice. There's a huge amount of overlap, but there's also a huge amount of tension between the two standards. So it's not really about just adopting them. You have to work out the tensions. One of the tensions in here is the provision of fresh air. We all know in Singapore, when you provide more fresh air to a building, you have to dehumidify it. It's a huge energy investment to do that. And so when you start to put the standards of WELL, which require an extremely high quantum of fresh air next to the requirements of Greenmark for energy efficiency, there's a tension there that needs to be worked through to come up with innovative systems of air conditioning. So in our case, we had to come up with a completely new way of air conditioning the elementary school just to deal with this tension between maximum amount of fresh air, which has become hugely relevant in COVID times, and the building performance in terms of energy. So Greenmark, I think we all know it. You may not be familiar with Greenmark 2021. Really hats off to BCA. I mean, I'm a vocal, you know, I suppose you could call it critic of green building and deficits in the green building schema of Singapore. But this one really is going in the right direction. So a lot of it's about compliance with authority, but a lot of it gives you a great local context for tropical building. It's probably, I would say it is the best tropical building evaluation accreditation scheme in the world here. They've tied it back to the SDGs. So the SDGs are part of our educational process. It's the glue that's sort of holding everybody together. And they've aligned it really, really well with this. You can see that there's still very clear focus on energy efficiency, but then they're starting to think, right, what's next? What's next? So maintainability, a huge part, often forgotten, intelligence here, and looking at the health and well-being aspect that I'll go through in a minute. So even with us, and we're going for this Greenmark Platinum super low energy, which I have achieved before, but it's different this time. It's actually quite a challenge for us. So this means that the energy efficiency thing is still heavily weighted, but a lot of these other factors need to come into play in order for you to achieve that. And I think over the coming years, all of us will just have to focus more about a more detailed and holistic response to the building envelope. But I wanted to spend a bit of time introducing you to this building standard, because I don't think that this one is that well known in Singapore at the moment, and it's still a developing standard across the world. It is a private standard, so it's not quite got the support that BCA has and the alignment with the authorities and legislation. It's a private standard, just as LEED is here, but I think it's very thoughtful. It's, in my definition, it's the first standard that focuses on the relationship between the buildings and the occupants. So how does your building affect the humans that are going to inhabit it? and focus on human health. Now, that might sound obvious now after 2 years of going through this COVID crisis, but it wasn't. And as you go forward, the buildings that are being built today don't factor this in. But I would like to say that I'm a very strong advocate that once you understand how to make a healthy building, it's sort of a moral imperative to do so in the future. It's not something that you could really say, well, you know, I'm going to save a bit of money there because I need to save a bit of money. I know that that will affect the well-being of the occupants, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I think this becomes interesting because it isn't really a trade-off in terms of NPV or dollar value. It's a human trade-off. It's a trade-off between, do I do something intentional that makes this building less healthy for its occupants? And if I was to make a prediction, I would say that what is going to be interesting is the power of the consumer, the power of people to say, actually, if you're going to put me to work and you're going to bring me into the office environment, I need some sort of confidence that it's the right type of environment, that it's healthy, that it's really the right type of environment for me to spend a significant proportion of my life in. So it's broken into 10 standards. The standards are here. I won't go through them, but I'm going to show you a few examples. And within that, there's 23 sort of prerequisites to it. It's very challenging, extremely challenging to do. And it's based on a model that is not really strongly enforced in Singapore, which is it's a model of you do your self-assessment and then you have a really robust interrogation and evaluation on this, along with quite a number of tests that you have to perform. It's not cheap. This is not something that you would see. I mean, BCA Green Mark is, I would say, artificially cheap, but this one is not. So it's quite an investment. I'm going to give you some examples, and I picked a few that I think are unusual, but very relevant for us. So within those 10 standards is one called MIND here. So MIND is all about the mental, a tip of the hat to the mental well-being and custody of those occupants inside the building. So I'm not sure if you can see that, those that have good eyes, but there's one in there as a precondition, which is mental health promotion here, which basically forces the building designer to consider very clearly how they're going to support the occupants of the building in mental health promotion. And that might be the provision of spaces to relax and free your mind, might be the provision of on-site counseling, the access to all sorts of things. But it's a precondition. You've got no way to escape from it. And I think that, if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, is one of the key cornerstones of ensuring that people come back to the office and feel welcome and supported here. It also covers things that we know aid your mental well-being. Access to nature, being able to see a view, being able to see trees, being able to see plants. We know that that's good for you here, but so often buildings forget this. So that makes it a pretty stringent approach and really forces building owners and I suppose landlords to be very, very intentional about design in regards to mental health. And then movement. We've seen in Green Mark, they promote cycling, they promote an active lifestyle here. But this one takes it one step further and drops down into ergonomics here, making sure that the building works well. So Singapore has a very, very robust accessibility code, but it doesn't really have a great robust code for saying your position of your desk, how things move around, how you interact with the equipment that you have in there to reduce physical strain. And that's a condition within WELL here. So when it comes to other things that I think aren't really that well considered in the context of the built environment here, acoustics. How many times have we all been to a restaurant and gone, I wish they could just sort the acoustics out. You can't hear the person speak on the other side. You tend to tune out here. So that's so essential in an office where they're moving towards a more open plan, collaborative environment. If you don't handle your noise and your acoustics, for us, core business of education, you're not going to learn. You're just going to tune out or maybe sit at the back and not be able to really understand what the educator is saying. But for an office, it's equally relevant. How many times do you see people with the old headphones on, tuned off? It's too noisy in here. I can't concentrate. I need to go somewhere else. It's disturbing. Anyone that's been in a poor acoustic environment knows that it's actually stressful here. And then obviously, thermal comfort, a really, really important one in Singapore. And this is trying to bridge that tension between, really reducing the energy consumption and creating an environment that is thermally sufficient for you to feel at home in that environment. So I think what it does for us is it brings us around to thinking about the building and taking different perspectives and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the owner. As a facilities guy, I'm constantly thinking about plant, equipment, all of this. But this standard has sort of taken me on a journey to really put myself in the end user's shoes. Some of the things that we've managed to do here, we've increased the fresh air. The fresh air in this building is probably, well, it is about 30% more than you would have in a standard, even an SLE building, because we actually adhere to ASHRAE standards, which are much higher than Singapore local standards at the moment. And you can see some of the other things that we've done to make it good and clear, including drinking water access. The standard forces you to think about that. In a school, no problem, but in an office environment, how many of you are in offices now that you're, within 50 meters of clean drinking water? So inside the classroom, it's really, again, holistic daylight, maximum amounts of daylight. And then we are all used to being intentional with our materials to make sure they're not off-gassing. But other things that we're perhaps not so intentional about is that visual connection with nature. Can you see out of the window? Can you see a vista? How is that working inside the building here? So I think WELL is really, really interesting. It's something that even if you're not going to adopt it, it's worth going through the WELL standard. It's all on the website to see what they're asking for. Because in my mind, what they're asking for now in 2021, it will become the future normal as we move forward with more intentional designs as the whole world is shifting. So I do encourage you to look at that. The next future of the building, I think, and the things that I'm probably quietly the most passionate about is the use of data here. So I think this is a blind spot for many building owners here. They talk about building management systems, they talk about this, but are they really using the data in the right way? Are they really empowering the people that are operating the building to work out what's going on? So our smart campus vision here, which I can share with anyone who's interested, goes through a number of layers to look at the building data in a very granular fashion. And in a school environment, that's fantastic, because from the bottom of the school to the top of the school, there's going to be children that are wanting to engage with the data. Many children can program, can make apps, can really engage with your building at levels that you previously thought were just the domain of the facilities department. And I found that working with students and young people on letting them understand how buildings and systems work, and then giving them access through APIs and open algorithms, give them a huge amount of buy-in and engagement in their behavior as they move through and use the building here. Again, trying to use the data to mirror some of our objectives in the whole high performance building is also really important. But what are the kind of challenges going to be as a sort of a sum up? It's always about humans. You can do anything you want. You can build the most efficient chiller plant. You can be proud of the cutting edge water reuse system that you have. But if you can't change the behavior, you're not going to really get anywhere. So our challenge is going to be that, working with the educators, working with everyone to change behavior. Here, really reimagining what that looks like. How does the human behavior reflect inside the campus? Awareness, Do they know what's happening inside the building? You know, how can we make the building visible, share the data, get people really done there? Can we embed the building inside the curriculum? And then it's all about culture, isn't it? You either believe it or you don't. You either want to change your behavior or you don't here. And I think it's really about culture. I know we're short of time. I'm just going to leave this slide up there. This is really a summation of our features here. And I was going to sneak in two little things because I know I've got some technical people. I've got Gautam there from UWC and stuff like that. So I'm gonna also hopefully be able to share some details on what this stuff means. So with that, I'm gonna hand over to Victor because I know I've run out of time, and over to you, Victor.
Thank you so much, Simon, and also thanks to Koc Thai. It's been very enjoyable listening to you both, and I've got some layman questions for you both before we turn to the Q&A box. So first off, if I can start with you, Koc Thai, you talked about one of the goals of the Green Plan is 80% of buildings to be green by 2030. That seems super ambitious given the stock of building and the different types of building, the ages of building, the conditions of buildings across Singapore.
Yeah.
Where are we in that journey to that goal?
Well, we are actually 10 years from now, 2020. Yeah. So the last number that I got is we are around 60 over %, reaching 70%. But really a lot of the incentive and push comes from the government side, especially the government building, the public building, the public housing by HDB, JTC, and significantly also from LTA, including the MRT stations. Yeah. So I think it's a challenge, but if we keep on the pace and increase some of the shortcoming that we face, as I mentioned earlier on, some of the private residential development, some of the landed house property. So we will still have to push on in that direction. But I am confident personally, it's not personal. I'm personally confident that we will be able to achieve that 80% if we work hard towards it. Yeah.
So that 80%, is that all buildings, including residential?
Yes, all new buildings. All new buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talked a lot, and I think also Simon talked about super low energy buildings. What exactly does that mean?
Simon or me?
I mean,
well, why don't you start first, Koc Thai, and then Simon will chip in.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Well, basically the super low energy buildings need to have positive net zero energy into the building. So like I mentioned earlier on, solar panel is one of the important criteria in achieving this super low energy building, to be very frank. And luckily, solar panel price have come down significantly a lot. But Singapore will still face challenge on not adequate surface area to put solar panel, because our building density are high and then we are tall. We only have that much of a roof. Maybe Simon, his building got a lot of roof, so he can put a lot of solar panels. But some of the building in the city actually face that challenge. So the future in achieving this target will be having solar panels on the facade. And I think that will be the next technology that we are looking at. And not only in terms of technology, because I as an architect, we don't like that old solar panel elevation that makes the whole building look like industrial building. Yeah, so it's also a challenge on the aesthetic part, how the building will look pretty. So, so I foresee that the next, in fact, the next few years, this will be the next wave of demand that will come into Singapore to achieve this SLEB building.
Thank you, Simon.
Well, I think let me take a slightly different approach from my point of view, and I'll try and justify some of the controversy that I'm going to say. I don't think solar panels are perhaps the best solution, because I personally think, and I'm sure Kok Tai, you would agree, that we have to deal with the passive design first. So the problem that we have here is that basically when you have mechanical systems as we do, you can pretty much build anything. I mean, we built a big glass house in Marina Bay and filled it with trees. We can do anything, right, with this mechanical things. But we can put low E glass and all the rest of it. But I think there needs to be a disincentive for architects and other people to not do the passive design thing. So we have ETTV rules, which are okay. They're quite robust, but easy to achieve with high performance glass. But what we don't have is a negative incentive to actually deal with the building in the first instance here. So I think if you put solar panels on a very inefficient building in the first place, you're largely just playing lip service to the intent of green building. The intent of green building, in my mind, is to use as little as possible to achieve the same goals.
Yeah.
So if your idea is thermal comfort, and that is a defined number, you try and use as little energy in the cleverest way to do it. And I think that this is somehow lost in the market here. And honestly speaking, in even some of our buildings, it was lost. So we could do better. And I know the reason why the architects are challenged to put maybe form over function here. And so, yes, we do have solar panels. We could have a lot less solar panels doing the same in terms of percentage of energy, you know, had we really been really tough on our own passive design. So I think that's my idea of this super low energy.
Simon, I totally agree with you, actually. What I meant just now is that, of course, fundamentally, we must achieve those reduction in using energy and using passive design. Yeah, so those are fundamental. Yeah, so I totally agree with you. In today's context, in Singapore, some of the building really is energy guzzler. But I'm happy to see most of the shopping mall now in Singapore is not as cold as last time. Yeah. I mean, I used to see people wearing winter clothes in a shopping mall, which is ridiculous, you know, in Singapore. But I think with government initiative and also a lot of communication and education, the people who maintain the building actually understand more, and I think the user also feel more comfortable in using the space. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got two questions leading from your comments, starting first with Simon again. You know, why is it that so few developers use the integrated design process when it can save lots of money for them and the building owner? Now, I appreciate the point you made in your presentation that developers don't think about the operator of a building because they're commercial concern, they're looking to maximize profits, but surely to goodness, the IDP process is the way to go. Would you agree or not?
I obviously, I think it's really a no-brainer to say that you really have to think about the building as an integrated product here. But I've been involved in many IDP charrettes. You know, I've hosted a few here. You know, I've been invited to attend quite a number over the years here as a catalyst for thought. And the basic problem boils down to the way that we execute buildings in Singapore. So in Singapore, we are siloed, right? You have an M&E team, you have an architect, you have another problem. The fees are extremely low. right? And so, you know, I think when you're paying 1% for your M&E engineer, okay, the M&E engineer has to work over 27 projects here. And the time that you need to put into a high performance design is not recognized here. So it's really a race to the bottom in terms of fee, which means that your engineer has got about 10 minutes to design your aircon. And often you'll find, and I won't highlight anyone in particular, but often you'll find that actually your design was taken from somebody else, okay? And your shopping center that's too cold was because actually it's just rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So I think the IDP process is a basic exercise in psychology, Victor.
Yeah.
You need to break down the silos between the team. You need to have a strong leader and a catalyst in the middle to take risk, okay? So IDP will never work without taking risk. And somebody needs to shoulder that risk. If you're saying I want super efficient air conditioning, then you're going to have to challenge yourself on the operating criteria and the risk, and you're going to have to suck it up as an owner. Now, never happens. Everyone's super kiasu and make sure that, okay, I'll double this, I'll put more of this and a bit more of that on it. And before long, you've got a super robust building that you'll be able to chill down to 14 degrees and store letters in it if you need to. But that's not really the intention of IDP. So I think IDP needs a strong catalyst. It needs a strong owner, and there are great developers, CDL, other people out there that act in this way, and to be very intentional. So I could talk for quite some time about the flaws of IDP and why it doesn't work here, from being involved in probably 50 charrettes over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I think the other element of why it doesn't work is exactly that silo element, and often the lack of respect the different people in their different silos have for the expertise and input of the other people in their different silos. And I've seen this because I've sat in one of these charrettes, and it's very clear the tension between, you know, the aesthetics of the architect and the, you know, the financial controller with the abacus and the calculator checking cost on every single thing. But the whole point is that if people did collaborate with mutual respect, it would be a better outcome. I agree with you though, Simon, that because it takes time, people feel they don't have the time to invest, despite the fact it would save them lots of money, which you know, is counterintuitive from a commercial point of view.
Absolutely. And I think one interesting experiment for anyone on this call to try is to try and swap the roles here. The usual thing is the architect leads, right? Yeah. And then the M&E fit in everything around the architect. So if the architect's made a triangle, they have to fit the AHU in the triangle. So swap the roles, right? Say, okay, here we go. And we did it actually. We did it in our middle school building recently. We recently said, okay, structural engineer, you're the boss. Design the building the way that you would design it if you had a chance. So what we did is we got reduced spans, we got more efficiency in the steel, everything shrunk, and the structural engineer went, well, this is the way I would do it. But the architect, you know, had built this beautiful flowing thing that was very buildable, but it was extremely inefficient. And so I think that's a very interesting piece of psychology in where the architect is the boss. What happens if you make the M&E the boss for a day? What do they do? You know, do they run the ducts everywhere and up and down here, or do they go, okay, why don't I put my AHUs here and do this? So that's another one for you, Victor.
Come on, Cocktai, you've got to come back and defend the architect.
Well, I think the boss in this case is not the architect, it's normally the project manager or the client. But I agree with Simon. In order to drive the IDP, you need strong leadership. And obviously in Singapore context, the leadership is pyramidal. You need a leader on top to flatten the processes to become horizontal. And we have seen it and done it a couple of times. Not all the times, to be very frank, because of the way our culture here, but sometimes we manage to do it. But it's a lot of time spent because every individual input is important to the outcome of the design. And like Simon mentioned, a lot of time is spent to innovate and to do things differently. And into that context, unfortunately, because some of the fee is so low, that most of the consultants are just producing, they are not designing, they are not innovating, because basically, you know, they just want to get the job done and move on to the next job. So it's an industrial challenge. But I've seen it happen in different manner. And from my personal experience, the driver have to come from the top, which is the boss of the developer, obviously down to the project manager. And if they can select a like-minded team from the architects is important, because normally people look at architects as a leader of a project. But if you find a like-minded architects that can understand the processes and form a good team, I think it can be, you can have a better result than those top-down processes. But like I say, from my experience, is far and rare. I've encountered only a few rounds. Yeah, because obviously in Singapore, time is money, and you know you need to run and the usual stuff, lah. Yeah. So
yeah, and also the drag of this is the way we've done it before, which you know you come across all the time. I think that is also a drag on innovation. And there are a lot of people very set in their ways, you know, because this is how it's been for the longest time. But yeah, the collaborative approach is the best, and I'm glad you both agree. It does take time, but it does mean considerable financial and environmental benefits.
Victor, I want to stress a point here, including the, you know, all the participants. You know, productivity, unfortunately, is at the opposite of innovation, right? When we talk about innovation, we're talking about taking risks, like Simon said, making mistake, correcting the mistake, you know, test out new ideas, the unknown factors. Productivity means you already know what to do. You improve the processes from the last project to become more efficient on the next. And you hope to improve a little bit, but you are not going to change the system because you know that is the most productive way of doing so. So it's actually two different angle altogether to look at things, you know, and really for us, or at least for me as an architect practicing, it's always a challenge to balance these two, because like I said, on one hand, the developer is asking you, you know, when are you going to get approval? When are you going to start building? When are you going to launch? But on the other hand, you say, I want to do something different. I want to do something special. It's going to be a lot of cost. You're going to find a cheaper, cost-efficient way to achieve it. So it's really a tough challenge. Yeah.
I'm telling you, without an appetite for risk, you will never get an efficient building. Okay, because you're just not willing to make the hard decisions to get to where you need to get to. Yeah. Impossible.
Is it an appetite for risk, or is it an appetite for change?
No, it's absolutely an appetite for considered risk here, because I can promise you, without disparaging any of the professionals that work with me, there is a reduced risk appetite in the consultant market. There is just really, why would they take that risk? There is no benefit to taking that risk here. So you come to someone and you say, I want a very innovative, I want the best, I want this, I want that. And then you say, I want it on time, I want it on budget, and you know, I don't want to ever see you again once the building's finished. Yeah. And so I've come across it even on a micro level. You know, you try something new and it doesn't work, right? And even in our school, we have systems that people have put in the past, and maybe they don't work quite, but I can see the intention. I can see the thinking behind them trying to do something fresh and new here. And it maybe doesn't work quite so well as it could, but they're going in the right direction. And I think in 3 versions time, it would work. But you have to be prepared for it to fail. And I suppose that's such an obvious message when you look at entrepreneurial approaches to anything in the world. You have to be prepared to fail. So as an owner, you have to say, look, you know, okay, like, please put in less of that, because I think we can do with less, because I've thought about it. And you can do it mathematically, Victor. it's not like I'm just waking up in the morning and firing from the hip. You can sit there and say, look, I really think that we're not going to use that much power. So just let's unpack that and try and work it out, because as you know, we lose 2% from the transformer. So if I can get rid of one transformer, I'm good. Yeah. But then you as the owner has to say, I've considered all my factor and I'm willing to get rid of a transformer.
Yeah.
Okay. But who does that? I mean, literally, who does that? Who on this call does that? Yeah. I mean, we do, but like who does that? So I've not seen it. I've not seen anyone come to the table and say, hey, aren't we supposed to be SLE? Isn't that 60% less energy? Why do I still have 6 transformers in the basement?
Yeah.
So you have an SLE certificate on the wall and you have 4 transformers on soak downstairs using 3% of the energy of your building. So I don't want to come across as being a negative person, because I'm not. I'm just pointing out the realities of the industry that we all work in.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the comment on fees, because clearly, if there's no benefit to people, why would they take a different approach? And that kind of is troubling in its own way, because it's an inhibitor to progress. One final question for you, Simon, before I turn to the Q&A box, and that is, just how do you achieve that nice, comfortable environment while being super energy efficient and having lots of fresh air at the same time? Because that is a conundrum I cannot get my head around.
The Holy Grail. Okay.
The Holy Grail.
So I think the first thing is, and we have a distinct advantage over others, is that you really have to understand your building. So if I said to you, how many CFM do you need to put inside a classroom for it to feel healthy? Everyone would just pluck it out the air here. But I suppose the easiest way to think about it, and the way that we've tried to approach it, so we've tried to get 30% more fresh air into a classroom than you would have in a normal office building or in your environment here. 30%, that's a huge. So how do I get 30% into the classroom without having to dehumidify, go crazy, and all of the rest of it? The key to it, and the key to it, which we've sort of finessed over the last 10 years, in my mind at least, is to start by saying let's introduce less air in the first place. So without wanting to go down a technical route, there's different types of cooling you need. Okay,
don't go technical, because you'll lose me.
Yeah, so there's two types of cooling, right? There's a sort of latent cooling that you need to keep yourself, and then there's a comfort cooling, right? So I think what you need to do is to decouple the 2 different types of cooling, the dehumidification from the airflow. So once you decouple these 2 things as a cooling approach, a lot becomes possible. So if you, in your own personal house, you can try this great experiment. Install a ceiling fan right next to your air conditioning unit, okay? And see what happens. The moment you turn your aircon on and the fan at the same time, you freeze. because actually it's the movement of air over the skin that creates a cooling effect, not necessarily the temperature of the room. So when you decouple the humidity piece from the actual are you feeling comfortable piece, you can come up with a hybrid solution that works. And so for us, largely what we've done is, okay, we need to put fresh air in, but let's start by putting less fresh air in. And let's deal with the other side of the bargain, the thermal comfort bit, not by blowing air down a huge aluminium tube from the basement here in order to blow it over your skin to make you feel comfortable. Let's do it right there. Let's put a DC fan in right above you, make it turn slowly, move the air around, and then do the dehumidification piece only. So I think, Victor, this isn't innovative thinking, right? This is just logical thinking. But there is plenty of strategies on hybrid cooling here that we have. And I actually have a slide on it because I thought someone might be interested, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. But there is something there, Victor. 30% more fresh air, which is essential to the well-being of the occupants. Keep the CO2 really low. here in line with outdoor, but keep it a comfortable environment. That's our experiment. Let's see if it works.
Fantastic, thank you. Now let's turn to the very patient audience, and I see that the poll has been prolific. So let's kick off with some of Paul's questions. First of all, do you think the government should make it mandatory for buildings, and that would apply to new developers and existing MCSTs, to meet the minimum green standards instead of voluntary adoption?
Well, I think at the moment, if you are going to renovate your building, you got to comply with the new requirement. It's a mandatory, yeah. But of course, if you don't do any renovation to your building, the government cannot force you to do anything, right? Yeah. So all new buildings, including upgrading and renovating now, all have to comply with the new green building requirements.
Okay. Any comments from Simon?
I'm super skeptical if we can get there without legislation. Yeah, I think we do need a degree of legislation.
Yeah.
Singapore is unique. It's probably the country that's most likely to succeed by using legislation, because the building stock is quite standard. Everyone basically has a similar type of building here. So therefore, the government can put out logical legislation that doesn't need too much compromise. And then the second point is the government own everything. They own the entire value chain of green building. They own the accreditation scheme that everyone has to adopt, and they also own all the legislation. And also they take a multi-agency approach. So you've got PUB on the table, you've got everyone's on the table. So I think that the government is very uniquely positioned to drive change. And we've seen this over the last 10 years by slowly boiling the frog, as I would call it, slowly raising the heat in the pan. You don't even know you're being boiled, but eventually it's happened to you. So I think that that's a very interesting journey that the government's on, and one that I highly commend personally.
In fact, sorry, Victor, in fact, sometimes this kind of legislation may have some negative impact on some of the old development, because in order for them to renovate or upgrade, they got to put in a lot of money, not only in terms of green building per se, but in terms of all code compliance, from fire departments to universal design, all got to comply with the latest code. So when some of the owners realized that the amount of money they had to spend just to upgrade the building, they actually decided not to, and the building becomes older and older. In fact, yeah. So that's actually another challenge. So even though sometimes we do give, the government do give incentive and things like that, but it is not enough to trade off all the compliance. I'm not talking about only green building. I'm talking about all other agencies' requirement. So in Singapore, if you want to do something to your house or your building, it's all compliant with the latest code. Yes. You cannot backtrack. You say your building done 2005, follow old code. No, cannot.
Yeah. That's a big problem.
It's pretty costly, Simon, right? Yeah.
It's a big problem. That particular law is a big problem.
Yeah.
And a big commercial hindrance to any change.
Yeah.
Okay, so the power, but sometimes the constraining nature of legislation. Yeah. Another one from Paul, and this is all about how green mark certification is awarded. So he says he learned from a previous webinar that a building can get green mark certification by meeting certain key thresholds, but not necessarily all of them. So should we make it compulsory to meet all the thresholds before a green mark certification can be issued?
Simon?
I don't think so. So green mark is a tiered system.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a tiered and it's a calibrated system. Okay. And not everything applies to everybody. And so I think that it's struck the right balance between a system that encourages you to push the boundaries. There is a reward. You can get, there's the top level and there's an entry level. So me personally, I think a calibrated scheme where you can be rewarded for achieving a particular standard, and you can, to some degree, pick and choose the things that are relevant to your building stock is really essential. But I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. Within all green mark, there's prerequisites that are non-negotiable. Okay, you can't choose them. You absolutely need to get them. And I think there's also maybe a misunderstanding that green mark is actually compulsory in many senses, right? And so the prerequisites you can't run away from. So that the scheme already has the sort of carrot and stick approach inside it, I would say.
In true Singapore style.
Yeah, but Kok Tai, you know it much better than me.
well, in fact, you're right, Simon. In fact, just now you mentioned there's a slide on the holistic approach for the green mark, right? From EE to well-being to innovation and resilience. And this issue have been debated lengthily, including our Green Mark 2021. And we come up with this concept that, look, it should be a buffet. That you can choose and pick and choose whatever you like. But each one of them have its own requirement. You know, it's not like you just ignore one of them, right? So it's more of a balanced buffet spread, so that the guy who is going to have this meal also have a balanced diet. You know, so that is the concept that we have been talking about. That was debated 2 years ago. Yeah, so that is actually the approach that we are taking. Yeah.
Thank you. I got a question that I'll need your help with from James. Can the speakers comment on the cooling aspects of SGBMP, or what role does the Kigali Amendment and targeted reduction in HFC production and consumption by Singapore, and the use of lower GWP refrigerants in cooling equipment within the Kigali Amendment? None of which I understand.
I can get a bit of that for sure. I mean, okay. I mean, I suppose I can talk to it here. Look, I think that there is this tension between a high performance refrigerant and the global warming potential of the refrigerant. I mean, I have a personal opinion about it here, not a lot of science behind my opinion, but I do have a personal opinion that, you know, let's take a very famous coolant, like I think it's R123, yeah, which is being phased out as a super efficient refrigerant used in many of the large chillers in the world here. But it has a high GWP, right, global warming potential. So it's very much penalized in the world. It's a bit of a mystery to me, because if you start losing your refrigerant, it costs you a lot of money. So all of us try not to lose it. You know, we don't let it out into the atmosphere, or it's expensive stuff. If I lose the refrigerant out of a chiller, this may cost me $8,000 or $9,000 to put it back. So I'm not going to do that in a hurry. So I think when you have this global warming potential, it seems to be a very binary approach to a very complex situation. If you have a more efficient chiller, and say my chiller is running at 0.58, and I can push my chiller down to 0.56, yeah, the impact on that, on my energy consumption on a campus of my size, is in the region of tens of thousands of dollars of energy, you know, per month, which has a direct carbon output, sorry. So it seems a bit short-sighted. You penalize GWP, but then you have a less efficient, you know, refrigerant. I'm not an expert, personal opinion only. I think it's short-sighted. Yeah.
Well, same here. Richard, I'm not expert on this, but in a general sense, again, compared to Green Mark, basically is a series of badges that you can pick and choose. And within the badges, actually, there's a target meet. I don't remember there's a specific target for, sorry, just now you say what amendment is that?
Kigali
Amendment, yeah. So I don't remember it's specifically mentioned in the Green Mark. Like I said, there's different way of you to achieve that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually it's very flexible in getting a scoring within the Green Mark assessment. Yeah.
So let's end, because sadly we're out of time, with another one from Paul. He says, Simon, congratulations and thank you for SAS's Green Building Works. Very much appreciated. Can I ask if SAS would spend a bit more on sustainable solutions than conventional solutions, because the sustainable solutions mean something better for people and the environment? And if so, how much more percentage impact would that have to the budget? Good commercial question to end with.
Yeah, it's a very commercial question, but I suppose, look, when you're in the business of education, you're a not-for-profit and you put children's well-being and the well-being of your staff at the front of everything, it's going to be difficult to have a dollar-based conversation on a capital side of things here, if you know there's something you can do better. But I think that the underlying misunderstanding, and it's something I've been fighting about, and those that have heard me speak before will know that I'm pretty passionate about this idea that a green building is actually cost neutral on the CapEx, and the reduced OpEx is a bonus you get at the back end. But yeah, I think when you look at something, and I gave you that air conditioning example there, that air conditioning was a prime one, right? You don't go around a green building by installing the same stuff. You do it by fighting with overall installed capacity. So the electrical example I gave is a classic one. You can find it in any project. It's the first thing I look for if I'm going around and being asked to look at somebody's project. I will go after that. I'll be like, right, come on, let's see how much energy you're using at your transformer, at your HT side, because guarantee that people haven't taken a holistic approach to it. So the architect will go, right, low E glass, everything like that. We'll forget to tell the M&E engineer that, hey, I put low E glass in, you could probably have less aircon. The M&E engineer will go, well, I'm using rule of thumb, so I don't think I'm willing to take that risk. I'm going to give you the same amount of aircon. It's why a cinema is cold from a facilities point of view, because the M&E engineer wasn't told there was no windows. The M&E engineer was told that it's a box and does it by square meter, and was never told that the occupancy was only 20 people. The M&E engineer looked at the space, went, okay, the space is 300 square meters, one person per square meter, 300 people here, and like this. And then you get an air conditioning unit the size of a small planet. So I think that the whole idea about integrated design and that approach is that you have to chase through the savings through the building. Yes. If the architect's done the passive design, then your air conditioning should not be the same as a building that's orientated in a different direction. It should absolutely be less. And if your air conditioning is less on the plant side, then your power consumption has to be down. Yeah. So, you know, if I chop off your arm, I can probably give you a smaller heart. So, I mean, it's so simple in an analogy, and in a building sense, we don't do that, right? We absolutely just look at it as a big thing. And so no one ever looks holistically around the building. So if you were to talk to my consultant team, I'm sure they would tell you that I'm increasingly, you know, I'm really annoying by constantly querying their method of calculation. Like, why is it like that? Why are you giving me so much power? Why are you giving me so much cooling? And then trying to lead them on a journey to get them confident with, less air conditioning. Did you know this room has no windows? You know, did you know that the occupancy is actually only 20 people because I only show very bad movies? And so the air conditioning can be scaled down, Victor. And so that straight away your CapEx reduces. You know, I built a building in 2009 and actually we saved $30 million on it, right? By just going through it and slashing stuff that we don't need. And that again is back to this risk approach, your ability to be entrepreneurial and how much you're empowered. I work for some great organizations. They empower me, they let me do stuff that, you know, that allows us to get a great end product. So if you've got an organization that's willing to do that, you hire someone that's entrepreneurial and willing to take a risk. You work with, you know, a great consultant team that's aligned with your direction and is comfortable. You're going to get a cheaper building, and it's going to be high performance. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. Oh, except of course that people complicate it by not getting out of their silos.
Of course. I mean, this analogy that I gave is a classic one. You know, architect to engineer to this. It doesn't happen, and it's not a criticism of anyone involved in the process. It's just normal.
Yeah. So we need a new normal, even though I hate that phrase, but we do need a new normal for construction and buildings. I'm going to give the last word to Kok Tai. Kok Tai, your closing remarks.
Well, I hope that with today's seminars, all your members will have a better understanding of what the Singapore Green Building Master Plan is about. And I really encourage all the members, one way or another, who have some development to go for Green Mark, right? I mean, obviously there are bigger global challenge in crisis than just what we are talking about today. And that challenge is real. And to be very frank, even whatever we do today will not be able to turn things around in a global manner. But not to do is not the answer. We have to do something, right? Yeah. So my hope is that today all your members will have a good take of what we have shared, and hopefully in your project on development, you will look into the Singapore Green Building Master Plan as a reference point for the development in Singapore, at least, or even in the region for that matter. Thanks.
Kok Tai, thank you so much. And thank you, Simon. This has been a great session. We're going to have to do this again and talk about all the things we haven't talked about, which is the way contractors are trained, the quality of construction, the way architects are trained, and how do we get more collaboration? And to use your phraseology, Simon, how do we get more risk-taking of the right sort?
Yeah.
But for now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this webinar. I want to thank you for your questions, particularly Paul, who has been prolific. Thank you very much. If there's anything that we can do for you, drop us a line to here-to-help@sicc.com.sg. We're always looking for input, suggestions for topics, themes, things you're worried about, things you think we've missed, things you think we should be concentrating on. So have a think over the holidays and let us know. But for now, it remains for me to, on behalf of my team, thank everybody for your company this morning and wish everybody the very best compliments of the season and all the best for 2022. Thank you very much and goodbye.